This arrogant man is Teo, the son of a Korean chaebol. Every time he gets together with his cronies, he stages arm wrestling matches. If the guy he's rooting for seems to be losing, Teo doesn't hesitate to jump in and lend a hand. Meanwhile, Detective Duchiol quietly observes his antics. But just when you think you know what's coming, Teo suddenly flips the food on the table, then unexpectedly drops to his knees and bows his head in apology before Duchiol. However, his eyes are full of arrogance and indifference. Faced with Teo's erratic and provocative behavior, Duchiol, to avoid being caught on camera for using excessive force, grits his teeth and suppresses his anger. It turns out Duchiol is playing an extra in a TV drama that Teo is financing, which is how he gets to meet the self-important bigwigs behind the scenes. He figures he just has to endure this party, and then he'll be done with them. But he has no idea that this is just the beginning of a deadly confrontation between the two. Teo can act this way with impunity because he's the third son of a top chaebol family. His family controls half of Korea's infrastructure construction industry. As one of Korea's leading conglomerates, it's commonplace for their young master to play around with actresses. But the cruelty hidden behind his wealth and power is something you could never imagine. One day, Teo and his bodyguard are sparring in an octagon. To prevent Teo from getting hurt, the bodyguard only dodges blows and doesn't attack. This immediately makes Teo feel like the bodyguard is looking down on him, so he orders him to fight back with full force. Hearing this, the bodyguard decides to stop holding back. Very quickly, Teo finds himself on the losing end. Humiliated in front of the crowd, Teo resorts to brutal tactics. He grabs his opponent's right leg, and despite the bodyguard's pleas, Teo breaks it. In Teo's eyes, there's nothing that money can't solve. But the arrival of a father and son pushes Teo into a deep pit of rage. On his way to the company one day, Teo spots a father and son protesting outside the company gates with signs. To avoid damaging the company's image, he has his secretary invite Mr. Bae and his son into his office, even thoughtfully offered Bae's son a macaron. But as soon as Teo learns that Bae is there to collect unpaid wages, he pretends to appease the father and son. He asks about the owed wages while handing Bae's son a toy sports car. "I'm here to ask for the 4 million won the company still owes me," Bae says. Hearing that it's only 4 million won, Teo immediately loses his composure. In his view, damaging the company's image for such a small amount of money is a huge insult. He calls in the foreman of the outsourced construction company and demands to know why the workers haven't been paid. But the foreman claims he was just going to pay them a little late. Hearing this, Teo pulls out 2 pairs of boxing gloves and forces the 2 men into a fight to the finish, declaring that the winner's version of the story will be accepted as the truth. Daeung, the foreman, immediately understands Teo's intentions and has someone disable the security cameras in the office. To further indulge Teo's cruel whims, he has Bae's son brought closer, wanting the child to witness firsthand how his father earns his money. "I won't fight in front of my son," Bae says. "If you don't fight, you won't get your wages." Teo taunts him, "See how hard your dad has to work for money?" Bae doesn't want his son to be traumatized, so he remains passive, absorbing blow after blow. To please Teo, the foreman relentlessly punches Bae in the face, stopping only when he collapses to the ground. Teo finds this one-sided fight incredibly boring. He throws 5 million won at Bae to cover the owed wages and then tosses another 20 million won at the child, supposedly to soothe his fragile heart. Bae is subjected to this inhumane humiliation right in front of his son. Bae was devastated. He locked himself in the bathroom, silently grieving for a long time, while his son waited outside the door. About half an hour later, Bae took his son away from Teo's company first, then returned alone. He wanted justice for himself and to reclaim his dignity. This decision would enrage the already unstable Teo. Cut to Bae lying in a hospital bed, barely clinging to life. The official story is that he committed suicide due to the pressures of life. There's even a suicide note saved on his phone. But everyone can easily guess this is Teo's handiwork. Just then, Dong Cheol receives a phone call and rushes to the hospital. Do Cheol is Bae's close friend, often helping his family. In Do Cheol's eyes, Bae was always someone with a positive outlook on life. He also loved his wife and son deeply. He wouldn't choose suicide over something like this. So, who is Dong Cheol? He's a detective, but he doesn't fit the stereotypical mold. He doesn't play by the rules. He'll cram himself into a car trunk all day, without even a bathroom break, to catch car thieves. Facing down a bunch of thugs, he'll casually relieve himself, zip up without washing his hands, and then make a phone call in broad daylight asking if backup has arrived. He'll even take a moment during the call to lovingly polish his flashy, figure-8-shaped silver bracelets. Facing Duchiol alone, the thugs naturally don't plan to surrender. But they don't know that on his journey from rookie cop to seasoned veteran, he's never backed down from a fight, and he's learned to use the surroundings to his advantage. Single-handedly, he takes them down without breaking a sweat. And, of course, the rest of the Korean police only show up after the problem has been solved. The lead thug accuses Duchiol of police brutality, which only highlights Dongcheol's masterful manipulation. He inflicts injuries on himself and then claims self-defense against the thugs. Following this lead, Duchiol uncovers the location of an illegal car smuggling operation and busts the Russian gang behind it. The one guy trying to slip away, he gets a personal invitation to ride along with Duchiol just like a VIP. This is how you know Dongcheol is a cool and resourceful cop. Not only is Duchiol skilled and righteous in his work, but he's also a devoted husband and father. He struggles to save enough for a down payment on a house, forcing his family to live in cramped, rented accommodations. So Duchiol picks up extra work in his spare time. He works as an extra on film sets, often playing the role of a police officer. He was even an extra in the TV drama Teo Financed, which is how he encountered the self-important people pulling the strings from behind the scenes. And that's how the events at the beginning of the story unfolded. Before Bae went to Teo's company, he'd repeatedly tried to contact the foreman to collect his wages, but to no avail. In a last-ditch effort, he tried calling Duchiol for help, but Duchiol was busy with other matters and couldn't answer. In desperation, Bae went directly to Teo's company and hung banners demanding his pay. Duchiol knows this isn't a simple case and immediately suspects Teo, but the case has been taken over by the police in another district, making it difficult for him to intervene directly. However, while eating with Bae's son, he learns that Bae was assaulted before he supposedly jumped. Remembering Teo's strange behavior at the party, Duchiol suspects foul play. But when Duchiol asks the detective in charge of the case if he's aware of Bae being assaulted, the detective feigns ignorance. Duchiol presses further, asking if they checked the security footage. The detective replies that the system was under maintenance. Duchiol demands the maintenance records. Seeing Duchiol relentlessly pursuing the matter, a higher-up suddenly intervenes. Duchiol is baffled. He just wants to cooperate with the investigation. Why the strong reaction? The superior dismisses him, using the excuse that he shouldn't interfere with another district's case. The unusual behavior of his colleagues convinces Duchiol that something fishy is going on. He decides to confront Teo directly. Predictably, Teo's minions make things difficult. As soon as Duchiol enters the company building, security stops him. Daeung claims Teo is out of town on business. But at that very moment, Teo walks by. The excessive obstruction by security only strengthens Duchiol's suspicions. After leaving the company, Teo heads to the octagon to spar with his bodyguard. The rich kid has some fighting skills, but he's no match for a trained professional. He's repeatedly knocked down, but the bodyguard, under strict instructions from Teo's associate, pulls his punches to save Teo's face. Ironically, Teo fights with brutal intensity. In the end, despite the bodyguard's pleas, Teo breaks his leg, mocking him for his supposed lack of skill. Meanwhile, Duchiol is on his way to visit Bae in the hospital when he runs into Daeung giving money to Bae's wife. Officer Taemin is also present, seemingly mediating between the two. Duchiol rushes over, asking Bae's wife if she accepted the money. Seeing Duchiol, Daeung quickly slips away. Duchiol tries to follow, but Taemin stops him. Duchiol, realizing something is wrong, questions Taemin. Why is a police officer helping the perpetrator and obstructing him? Is he even a real cop? He accuses Taemin of taking a bribe. Taemin, clearly uncomfortable, tries to attack Duchiol. His pathetic attempt is no match for Duchiol's skill. He's easily subdued. We cops may be broke, Duchiol says, gripping Taemin's arm, but we have our pride. Doesn't your conscience bother you, taking this money? He then leaves. Daeung goes to the rooftop to report to Teo, saying the detective seems motivated by something other than money. Suddenly, a lighter appears, offering him a cigarette. It's Taemin. Clearly, Daeung has bought him off. To completely shut down Duchiol's investigation, Teo uses his connections to reach out to a former colleague of the current police chief, applying pressure through him. Simultaneously, he arranges for Daeung to deliver a designer bag and cash to Duchiol's wife. But Duchiol's wife is a tough woman. She publicly exposes Dayoung's bribe attempt, asking him if he isn't tired of bribing people every day. Soon after, she storms into the police station and chews Duchiol out. What have you done to make them think we're so desperate for money that they try to bribe me? A man's greatest weakness is his family. Now that Teo has crossed that line, Duchiol is ready for all-out war. He immediately tracks down Teo, who is dining out. You can mess with me, but don't you dare touch my family. I'm not your dog to kick around. You messed with my family, you son of a bitch. Duchiol explodes. You call yourself a cop? You have no respect for the law. I don't need respect for the law when dealing with scum like you, Duchiol snarls. If you don't apologize to my family, I'll make you pay. He storms off. Left with no other options, Duchiol goes to the press, revealing that Bae was assaulted before he jumped and that Bae's son witnessed everything. The reporters are immediately hooked. Chaebol scandals are clickbait gold. Meanwhile, Dayoung, taking no chances, approaches the foreman, offering him money and safe passage out of the country to lay low for a while. He promises a generous reward once the dust settles. The foreman, however, declares his deep love for his homeland and refuses to leave. He suggests that if they can't solve the problem, they should just eliminate the source. Dayoung listens impassively. When the news of the assaulted workers' suicide breaks, Teo's father is forced to intervene. The company is already facing scrutiny, and now this negative publicity is pouring gasoline on the fire. He unleashes his fury on Dayoung, ordering his men to bribe the media and quell the public outcry. He warns Dayoung that if this happens again, he'll lose not only his job but also his right to beg on the streets. Back in his car, Teo's father recalls Dayoung's suggestion about the foreman. He wants it done immediately. Dayoung advises caution, pointing out the high risk. But Teo doesn't care. He needs to prove to his father that he can handle the situation. Meanwhile, Duchiol faces more trouble. Prosecutors arrive to investigate him. The charges? His wife accepted a designer bag from a major corporation in a public place. He used excessive force while apprehending criminals, and he overstepped his authority by confronting the corporation. They're building a case for insubordination. Teo has bribed these two prosecutors, aiming to strip Duchiol of his badge. They intend to suspend him pending an investigation. Fortunately, Captain O recognizes their malicious intent. He quickly uses his connections to check if the prosecution office actually authorized this investigation. After hanging up, he bursts into the interrogation room, demanding to see their warrant. The men claim they were sent directly by the chief prosecutor. Captain O reaches for his phone to confirm, and the two prosecutors, like startled cats, quickly gather their things and flee. Duchiol is speechless. Just then, Duchiol receives a tip from the foreman's wife. The foreman contacted her, demanding money so he could flee the country. As Duchiol prepares to arrest him, Captain O tries to stop him, worried about the potential fallout. A Chaebol heir like Teo is practically untouchable, protected by prosecutors and influence. But Duchiol can't ignore his friend's death. As Duchiol heads out, Captain O, despite his tough words, has a change of heart. He and his fellow officers join Duchiol, and the three rush to the foreman's apartment. But the foreman is waiting, knife in hand. He pulls one officer into the apartment and stabs him. The other two officers tackle the foreman. He's no match for two trained police officers. The foreman, seeing how skilled Dongchiol was in a fight, turned and smashed a window, using the gap between the walls to climb onto the roof. Duchiol didn't hesitate, following close behind. The two engaged in a rooftop chase. Thankfully, after a bit of scrambling and climbing, Dongchiol finally caught the foreman. Back at the police station, the chief received news of the capture and rushed over. Furious that one of his officers had been stabbed by the thugs, he immediately slapped the foreman across the face. He then ordered a full investigation into the assault on the police officer. Duchiol, hearing this, was relieved to the point of tears. He finally had a legitimate reason to investigate the case. He immediately delegated tasks. First, he ordered a search for the money Teo had given the foreman to escape. He then asked Ms. Bong to retrieve the records of all emergency calls made on the day of Bae's fall. He himself went to visit Bae's wife. According to Bae's wife, Bae had a low level of education and often confused the letters N and L when typing. The message he supposedly sent her before jumping was perfectly written, which was unusual. She then showed Duchiol their usual text message history. The astute Duchiol immediately sensed something was amiss and asked his colleagues to investigate all communication records from that time. Sure enough, the police records showed the first emergency call received on the day of the incident was at 11:39 a.m. However, they also discovered another call from a different number at the same location at 11:22 a.m. This call was disconnected before being answered. When the police called back, the person who answered claimed they hadn't intended to make an emergency call. Bay's text message to his wife was sent at 11:37 a.m. Adding to the suspicion, the security footage from Teo's floor that day was missing the half hour prior to the incident. These discrepancies in timing, while individually possibly coincidental, together painted a suspicious picture. Just as the mystery began to unravel, Dae-young unexpectedly turned himself in, surprising everyone. It turned out that a few hours earlier, Teo's father had undergone a complete personality change, behaving completely differently from his usual abusive self. He'd warmly invited Dae-young for a meal, personally serving him food and affectionately calling him family. This sudden change worried Dae-young as much as it pleased him. He knew something was up. Sure enough, Teo's father revealed his true intentions. He offered Dae-young the entire hotel in exchange for confessing to both the previous suicide and the recent assault on the police officer. He promised a full legal team to defend him and assured him that his wife and children would be taken care of, sent abroad for a comfortable vacation and schooling. This is what led to Dae-young's surrender at the police station. However, Dae-young was unaware of the new evidence the police had gathered. He didn't realize that Dong Cheol, using these seemingly small clues, had already pieced together the entire sequence of events. On that fateful day, after dropping his child off, Bae was consumed with anger over the earlier altercation and returned to the office. Another argument ensued, leading to a fatal accident. Dae-young's men, witnessing the death, panicked and tried to call the police. But Dae-young intervened, stopping them, shutting off the security cameras, and ordering a cleanup of the scene. He then used Bae's phone to send the fake suicide text message to Bae's wife before throwing Bae's body from the building to stage the suicide. Although Dong Cheol had reconstructed the events perfectly, Dae-young remained calm, confident that they had no proof. That is, until a figure appeared at the door. It was the bodyguard who had been present at the scene of Bae's death, the same bodyguard whose leg Teo later broke at the boxing gym, leading to his dismissal. Dae-young's face paled. To ensure the information was reliable, Du Cheol had the bodyguard call and confirm the details, then presented a new arrest plan to the chief. Unexpectedly, the chief severely criticized the plan. Teo frequented elite clubs, and a botched arrest would be disastrous for their small police precinct. However, the case had reached a critical point. With the mastermind almost within their grasp, Du Cheol and Captain O refused to give up. Seeing that their unwavering determination wasn't working, they appealed to the chief's emotions. Captain O lifted his shirt, revealing a scar from a past act of bravery. Not to be outdone, the chief lifted his hair, showing his scar. The score was 1-1. Du Cheol, seeing an opportunity, pulled down his pants slightly, revealing a scar from practicing Luyan Am Tsong, perhaps a specific martial art or practice. 2-1. After this display of battle scars, the chief softened slightly, though he still insisted on a flawless plan. Confrontation was out of the question. With the chief's reluctant support, the next steps became easier. That night, Du Cheol and his team staked out the nightclub. Soon, Teo's car arrived, making an illegal turn. Surrounded by bodyguards, he swaggered into the club, arm in arm with a young actress. Teo was hosting the party. Knowing Teo's habit of using drugs before such events, Du Cheol calculated the timing, ready to raid the club at any moment. However, minutes later, a suspicious car arrived, bypassing security and speeding into the underground garage. It was Teo's girlfriend, the celebrity Dahai. She barged into the party, demanding recognition for her unborn child before Teo fled the country. Seeing Dahai as a threat, Teo decided to teach her a lesson, producing a syringe, seemingly intending to perform a forced abortion. Dahai pleaded with him, but Teo appeared to have lost all humanity. Meanwhile, Du Cheol arrived at the club, but it was a private establishment frequented by the wealthy elite. Even the police couldn't simply barge in. Du Cheol and his team were stopped by security. In this crucial moment, Captain O took charge, firing a single shot to subdue the guards. The commotion alerted Teo, and he and his entourage retreated to the garage. Anticipating this, Du Cheol was already waiting. Teo, shielded by his bodyguards, escaped the club but encountered heavy traffic. He recklessly drove onto a crowded pedestrian street. Duccio, having shaken off the remaining bodyguards, pursued Teo on a police motorcycle. At an intersection, Duccio seized his opportunity, using the motorcycle to block Teo's path, forcing the sports car to stop in the middle of the crowded street. As Teo stepped out, Duccio confronted him, listing his crimes and preparing to make the arrest. Teo, accused of drunk driving, running a prostitution ring, and attempted murder, immediately attacked Duccio. Surrounded by curious onlookers and mindful of avoiding another accusation of police brutality, Duccio only defended himself, not retaliating. This allowed Teo to inflict serious damage. After venting his rage, Teo turned to leave, only to be stopped by the best fighter in Korea, Dong-suk. Not even his father could tell him to run now. At that moment, Duccio struggled to his feet. Seeing this, Teo charged again, but this time, Duccio fought back with renewed determination. Despite his exhaustion, he pushed Teo to his limit, finally managing to handcuff the wealthy heir. Severely injured, Duccio had no other choice but to hold on until backup arrived. Finally, reinforcements arrived, and Teo and his accomplices were brought to justice. Miraculously, the driver who had fallen from the building recovered under his family's care. Justice had prevailed. The narrative then concludes by asking the audience to reflect on the influence of money on human morality, inviting them to share their thoughts and how they would handle such situations. It ends with a promise of future movie reviews.